you, Chair. I have a few questions for Mr Atticus Fleming, the Deputy Secretary of the National Parks and Wildlife. So these questions relate to the reopening of Mount Warning. My first question is, I recently climbed the mountain along with about 20 locals. And as we were coming down, the locals were all convinced that we would be met by rangers at the bottom given an issued a fine, but to their surprise, there were no rangers there. And the speculation then amongst the locals was that because a parliamentarian had been with them, that there had been a stand-down order. Can you confirm whether that is, whether there's any credibility to that claim?
I'm going to ask Ms Stevens to deal with any specifics around Wollumben, but in relation to that question, I was certainly unaware that you were planning to climb, so I doubt very much that there's any substance to that.
Okay. And have you personally met with community stakeholders regarding the closure or the reopening of Mount Warning, and if so, who?
I might ask Ms Stevens to talk about the process and the level of engagement and consultation that's been undertaken.
I might start with the first question. Our approach to compliance in Wollumben has really been a staged one, transitioning from when initially we were using security guards and we were using quite a tight compliance. We've been focusing on education, signage. We've been focusing on ensuring that people were aware of the issues around safety at the site, and also the concerns of the traditional owners. And we're now at a point where we are patrolling. We have signage. When we have evidence that people have climbed, then we will look into it. Depending on the evidence that's collected, we've got law enforcement advice, and then we look into the appropriate action. But we're not specifically sending people or not sending people depending on what's going on. In terms of the consultation in recent times has been undertaken by the Minister, and she has had comprehensive meetings with all the stakeholders in a number of different forums to get their views, ranging from people representing the local economy through to people who have interests in bushwalking, through to the traditional Aboriginal owners. So there's a range of consultation going on, and that's happened over a period of time and in a number of different forums.
Thank you, Ms Stevens. Now, so the track is in a very bad state. It looked as though it had been hasn't been repaired for or maintained for about four years. The local community members have offered to provide working bees and to voluntarily correct it, but they're not permitted to. Would the National Parks and Wildlife why are they resisting that locals would voluntarily try and improve the track?
Well, at this stage, the track is legally closed under the National Parks and Wildlife Act regulation. It's closed until the 31st of December 2024 while the Minister continues to consult on the issue, and we aren't undertaking any maintenance on that track for that period while we wait.
And do you have an estimate of how much the repairs will cost? So you're saying that it's quite possible from the 1st of December that we would be then potentially reopening the track?
The area is closed until the 31st of December.
31st of December, right. So then if what would be the cost for bringing the track up until a safe condition again?
I'd have to take that on notice. We'd be able to provide you with an estimate of that, but I can't do that today.
That's okay. Have you considered reopening Mount Warning as a pay-to-enter style operation, or indeed including it as part of the annual National Park Pass?
Look, at this stage, the area is temporarily closed. The Minister is consulting with stakeholders, and she will be forming a view on the future of the management of the track and the summit, and we're awaiting for that process to work through.
So I've met a few times a local Aboriginal fellow by the name of Stuart Boyd, whose family claims to be the main custodians of the mountain in a traditional sense. But I understand that the National Parks and Wildlife has ignored Mr Boyd and his family members, but they have listened to the views of non-local Aboriginals. Can we explain why Stuart Boyd has not been consulted?
Cultural authority over the mountain is a matter for Aboriginal people. National Parks and Wildlife Service always would defer to Aboriginal people to make decisions around cultural authority and association. Mr Boyd approached Parks and requested a meeting with the Wollumba Consultative Group, and we've facilitated that. That will be happening very shortly in the next couple of weeks, where the discussion around cultural association and authority will happen amongst Aboriginal people.
And are you familiar with an anthropologist by the name of Dr. Harry Creamer?
Yes, I used to work with Dr. Creamer in the past.
Very good. Okay, well, so you would know that it was actually Prime Minister Gough Whitlam who brought him to Australia in the early 1970s, as he was a leading anthropologist, to look at Aboriginal sites around the country, particularly in New South Wales. Now he is he is of the view, having spent his entire life looking at these sites, that there is very, very few actual sites that are of significance to the Aboriginals. Are we taking into account his high level of understanding about this issue?
We've referred Dr. Creamer's most recent work to the Wollumba Consultative Group. The Wollumba Consultative Group is a group that represents a large a number of Aboriginal families and groups up in that area, but we're leaving it with them for them to consider, because obviously it's about cultural knowledge, it's about cultural association. It's not something that we're in a position to be making a decision about.
How many sites do you think actually on the mountain are of cultural significance? And are we talking about actual archaeology or sort of where things are remembered?
I don't have any personal knowledge of the cultural significance in terms of those sorts of details, so I couldn't answer that question.
Okay. Now, in June 2022, the former Minister for the Environment in the previous government, James Griffin, announced it was the intention of National Parks and Wildlife to hand over all national parks as Aboriginal freehold and lease them back to be run under Aboriginal control. Where is this policy at?
I might hand to Dr. Fleming to respond to that one.
So there is ongoing consultation in relation to that proposal. Obviously, we are interested in expanding joint management arrangements, but we're doing that very carefully, very cautiously, and there'll be further consultation as that unfolds.
So that is still the
I might just add on that as well. It's currently being progressed through the Closing the Gap framework, which requires a partnership-based approach with the Council of Aboriginal Peak Organisations. So those discussions have commenced recently, and there'll be further updates on that as the work progresses.
Right. So it is still the policy of the department to move into the direction of handing all national parks in New South Wales to Aboriginal freehold. Is that the direction that we're heading in?
I should add that the initial proposal or the initial announcement talked about this occurring over, I think it was a couple of decades. So there was never any intention that this be a rushed process. There was always an intention that there be extensive consultation, obviously with Aboriginal people, and as Mr. Lena said, through the Closing the Gap process, and with non-Aboriginal people. So that process is unfolding, but there is no rush to do this. It's being very cautiously progressed.
So that could potentially include the Sydney Harbour National Park?
Well, the proposal related to the park estate as a whole, but Ms Stevens could talk a little bit about Goat Island, Meemel.
So Meemel, Goat Island in Sydney Harbour National Park, under the previous government, an agreement was made that would be handed back to Aboriginal people, and we have a process. We have a committee made up predominantly of Aboriginal people from a number of different groups, land councils, but also groups representing other Aboriginal people, and they're meeting on a regular basis to talk about what kind of plans and what kind of model might be adopted in terms of handing back Goat Island to Aboriginal people. So the MEMEL project is an ongoing project, which is an example, I guess, of one of the projects that's been undertaken under the wider umbrella of this program.
Mr. Ruddick, I might just add I think it's 34 joint management arrangements in place already across the park estate, which covers about 30%. Now, there are sort of 3 different models, broadly speaking. Some of them involve handback, some of them are based around native title, and some of them are based around other arrangements. And they include places that have significant levels of visitation. They have been very successful in terms of promoting socio-economic outcomes as well as conservation outcomes and, of course, cultural outcomes.
Thank you.
Over to you.